welcome to the news. I am Saja Brito. Coming up this afternoon, President Barrow delivers 2020 State of the Nation address. National Assembly member asked Barrow to wear a mask in Parliament since it was the law of the House. Dabo says 2020 SONA address not different from a previous one, besides emphasis on the coronavirus pandemic. My guests today are Banka Mani and Dr. Ismaila Sise, who will help us dissect today's SONA address. But first, we'll begin with the newspapers. The Standard newspaper is reporting that Latrikunda Nam warns he will not back any retroactive law. Ex-Saba councillor killed in road accident. Dusano reacts to APRC's Dudu Ja. And Economic explains checkpoint encounter with a prison's truck. And of course, the lead story on the Standard newspaper, suspense tension as National Assembly members scrutinize draft a constitution. Let's take a look at some of these stories in detail. Suspense tension as National Assembly members scrutinize a draft constitution. Deliberations at the National Assembly yesterday were characterized by tension and suspense as members scrutinized the draft for a new constitution with its contentious and controversial clauses. The nation will now wait at least on Monday to know fate of this most important document. Some of the hottest topics included the presidential term limit, citizenship, and secularism. The 51 deputies who turned up at the National Assembly debated on the general merits and principles of the bill, to be followed by a vote at which a three-quarters of the members will be required to vote yes before the bill can proceed to the next stage of the process. Latrikunda Nam warns he would not back any retroactive law. In his contribution during the second reading of the constitutional promulgation bill yesterday, the member for Latrikunda Sabiji Seiku Marong said he will not support a retroactive law. He was referring to a draft constitution provision which will make a current term of President Adama Barrow be counted as his first term. When passed, this means the president can serve only one more term if he wins next election year. Cabinet itself had observed in a position paper to the Constitutional Review Commission that any retroactive application of the law will be discriminatory to the current President Adama Barrow. Dusano reacts to APRC's Dudu Ja. The deputy political advisor to President Adama Barrow has reiterated that the National People's Party will certainly secure 75% of the votes in the forthcoming 2021 presidential election, and nothing can stop that. Dusano was speaking to the Standard newspaper on telephone on Monday, responding to claims by Dudu Ja, the APRC deputy spokesperson, who said the decision by the president to request for the extension of the state of economic to 2021 is political. Mr. Ja also wondered whether by declaring that they will score the near impossible 75% in 2021, the NPP and government are not planning to rig elections. Economic explains checkpoint encounter with prison struck. Following reports of an incident at Economic Checkpoint in Fonyi when a truck belonging to the prisons department had its tires busted, the spokesman of the West African troops has said the matter was amicably resolved and there was no shooting at all, contrary to speculations on social media. So the rumors were put to rest quickly. GPU insists journalists must be allowed in Parliament. The Gambia Press Union has slammed the National Assembly authorities' decision to deny the majority of the Gambian journalists entry during the first reading of the constitutional promulgation bill. The union president, Sirif Bojang Jr., told journalists yesterday they have written to the National Assembly demanding them to henceforth allow journalists entry. All media houses except GRTS, QTV and iAfrica TV were denied access to the National Assembly to cover the constitutional promulgation bill 2020. That's it for the Standard newspaper. Let's take a look at some of the headlines on the point. GPU slams Parliament for unilateral decision. A story we've already looked at on the Standard newspaper. COVID-19, Gambia registers 12 new cases. Let's take a look at that story. The Ministry of Health 145th National Situation Report has unveiled the registration of 12 new positive coronavirus cases, taking the number of COVID-19 cases in the country to 3,440 cases. The Gambia confirmed its first case of the novel coronavirus in the country on 16 March 2020. The report also registered 2 new COVID-19 related deaths, bringing the total deaths to 107. At least 144 COVID-19 patients recovered and got discharged. 1 new person was taken into quarantine while 77 were discharged. That's it for the newspaper. Let's go for a break and we'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. And now His Excellency President Adama Barrow has today delivered his annual State of the Nation address before lawmakers. The SONA address outlines the plans and policies of his government. More in this excerpt.
It is my honor and pleasure to deliver this annual address to the honorable members of this August Assembly. On my government's performance during the course of the last legislative year. Today, my address presents the successes and challenges of a country that was on a steep rise towards economic boom and socio-political transformation when the unexpected struck. This was the sudden outbreak and rapid spread of the coronavirus, COVID-19. It is an address which attempts to duly highlight my government's achievements and the ever-increasing devastation and impact of the pandemic on the economy and life in the Gambia. It is also an address which should be appreciated within the context of a unique global pandemic and a crisis of tragic consequences. The address highlights a calamity that has dwindled resources, disrupted plans and schedules, and shattered hopes and expectations. This is a crisis that has taken the world by storm and remains a threat to all nations, rich and poor, big and small. In the Gambia, the momentum and expectations for rapid progress were evidently very high. Major development projects and achievements closely followed one another as support and resources were sought and tapped from various sources. The people were politically excited, and my government was optimistic of delivering on our promise of leading the nation to unprecedented economic growth and social regeneration in a democratic haven for all Gambians. Unfortunately, like other nations, we had to curtail certain economic activities, restrict movement, scale down work schedules, and finally declare a state of emergency. Economically, key revenue earning institutions have since been crippled, people grounded, and communities adversely affected. Examples will be cited in my address to show the extent of the impact of the pandemic on the economy and social life, and to indicate its implications on the 2018-2021 National Development Plan, NDP, and therefore on our national goals and objectives. Details on sector activities specific to the pandemic will not, however, feature much. The loss of revenue, operational setbacks, and missed targets and opportunities are too obvious to require repetition in each sector report. Let me observe that, important as our development achievements may be, the pandemic and its impact are uniquely more urgent and consequently require utmost attention. As a result, I will focus on the pandemic, hopeful that many of my government's infrastructural, legal, institutional, and other development successes have been reported widely on the media and other forms of news outlets. Nevertheless, prompted by the National Constitution, I am obliged to officially report on my government's performance during the course of the last legislative year.
Watanbe, brought to you by Africell.
Be part of the amazing conversations with Gambia's greatest minds and personalities. Get ready to be entertained, inspired, and motivated on the Watanbe platform. Plus, stand a chance of winning the shopping of your life. Call or SMS 1010 for $3 is only to win cash prizes and a free shopping spree.
Join Watanbe live on GRTS and social media on Mondays and Fridays at 9 p.m. Kailin New Watan.
Where Africell goes, nobody dares to follow.
Meanwhile, a member of parliament took on President Adama Barrow after he removed his face mask during the State of the Nation address. Tumana MP Fode Enem Drame stood and asked the Speaker of the House to ask President Barrow to put on his face mask as the President attempted to begin his speech. Health Minister quickly rushed to his defense after he was asked by the Fatu Network on the President's decision not to wear a mask even though it was mandatory. Let's take a look.
Can you ask the President to put on the face mask, since it's the rules of the Parliament?
As the country's health chief, we've seen the President chose not to wear a face mask. Someone in the chamber advised him to wear his face mask, but he turned a blind eye to that. He ignored it.
Didn't you see him wear a face mask before he got out?
Today he did.
Were you there?
I saw him wearing it after.
Why didn't you comment on that? So your reason should have been, your question.
It is mandatory.
Your question, I would suggest, would have been, why did he choose to wear it at that time? You know when we say the face mask rules, and of course you did know also that there are quite some exceptions, conditions, which may warrant wearing the face mask or not wearing the face mask as time. There are those exceptions. There are people sometimes when they speak, and how long was that speech? It was a very long speech. So when some people speak with the face mask for that long, sometimes it creates challenges for them with regards to breathing and so on and so forth. So sometimes before people speculate, we need to know the reasons behind. Many of us do not speak that long, do you? Do you ever get to speak this long? No, I don't.
I do. Sometimes I'll be in the studio. I'll host a show for 3 hours.
So that is good. But at least you take breaks because you host a show, you ask questions, and the people do most of the talking. But this one is on one individual talking. So that difference is there. So sometimes when we see things, it's good to know the reason before we speculate.
The Secretary General and party leader of the United Democratic Party has described President Barrow's speech as not too different from the previous. The UDP leader shared his opinion on today's Sona address with the Fatu Network. More in this.
Well, one important I make of it is fulfilling the constitutional requirement. That's abiding by the Constitution. And of course, my view is that it appears to be more of a speech or deliberations on the COVID-19, coronavirus. I think that is all. The whole speech is about that. It's a sermon on coronavirus.
But are you impressed about this speech at all? These are unprecedented times. The country is going through a crisis.
Well, these are unprecedented times, but you see, the speech is not different. It's not different from the previous ones, and I'm sure when you look at the budget, last budget, you see that it's not very different from it, and I'm sure in December, when the minister presents his budget, it's not going to be very different from this. I think really we realize that the coronavirus has caused a lot of destruction. I mean, it has delayed a lot of things, but then I would have thought that with all these happenings, the catastrophic effect of the coronavirus, we would have come with new thinking. And in fact, I would have thought that, we would, really approach this with a great pessimism that the coronavirus is here, is going to be dreadful, but then, the measures that we are going to take to combat it will put us in a better position. I think that would have been, that's what I thought.
Finally, one thing the president made crystal clear has to do with elections. He said his government is determined to ensuring that election takes place next year. What do you have to say about that as a political leader?
Well, I mean, we do not expect him to say anything other than that. After all, in 1981, 1982, elections were held in this country under a state of public emergency, although the public emergency might be different, but there was a state of public emergency which had affected freedom of assembly, and so forth. So it's not, for me, it's not a surprise, and we didn't expect him to say anything different.
Honorable, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Well, one important I make of it is fulfilling a constitutional requirement. That's abiding by the Constitution. And of course, my view is that it appears to be more of a speech or deliberations on the
Home is where the heart is. Home is where you feel safe and secure. Dalaba Housing Estate is the newest estate by TAF Africa Global, located strategically along the newly built Sokoto Jabang Highway. Dalaba Estates offers roads, street lights, a gated community that offers water reticulation system, solar street lights, and a proper drainage system. Over the next 10 years, TAF Africa Global aims to build 10,000 homes in the Gambia for you to own. For you to feel safe and secure in a community with all the necessities to live comfortably. Home.
Welcome back, and now I am joined by my two special guests on the show today, Banka Mane, activist and social commentator, and of course Dr. Ismaila Cisse, political science lecturer at the University of the Gambia and presidential aspirant. Doctor and Banka, are you there?
Yes, am I audible? Thank you very much, Sergeant, for having me. Well, thank you very much, Sergeant. You've just said one of the most important speeches that Gambia look up to. Therefore, it was an anticlimax. If we look up to this speech from the president for a whole year, and the kind of speech we heard today really wasn't very convincing. What it shows is a president who is out of touch with the population, obviously. If you look at the speech and you look at the current complex problems that the country is facing and the kind of solution that the people are looking for from our leader, there's a misalignment there, there's a mismatch. And you have to understand that obviously the president's SONA this year, as with previous SONAs, for me, the kind of structure and the approach it takes is not what we will really expect from the SONA. What we've seen is that they go ministry by ministry, talking about some of the things that the ministries have either done or are planning to do. For us, that is not enough. In fact, that makes me interrogate and question usefulness of some of these ministries as they are today. For me, I believe that after the change of government in 2016, we should have really reformed some of these ministries and create a kind of a new model government that can really help us aspire to the kind of development we want. Most of these ministries are really not fit for purpose anymore. Nonetheless, what I'm seeing here is I was expecting the president to tackle the more important, more complex problems, the more urgent problems the country is facing now. What are his plans? What are his strategies? What are his visions in problems such as policing? We've seen that crime has really increased recently, especially burglaries and so on and so forth. So what policing? Is he going to increase policing? What are his policies for policing? What about ECOMIC, obviously, a very contentious issue? I didn't hear anything on that. Why is he really planning to extend ECOMIC's mandate? Based on what? What are his plans for that? Also, what is ECOMIC's exit strategy? What are his plans after the next 6 months? Nothing on that. Security also was something that he didn't really delve into. I've listened to every chapter and verse of the speech and also read it as well, but I didn't see why he talked about security in terms of how the statistics are telling us that crime has really increased. Healthcare is also something. Recently, we've seen a lot of premature deaths in our hospitals, even though we know that perhaps it's been.
Hello?
Am I there?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, even though it didn't amplify by COVID-19 yet, but we wanted to know exactly what is he planning to do with the healthcare sector. Education is one thing. Employment for young people, especially those young people or those people who lost their jobs because of COVID-19, living in anxiety. What is the president planning to do for them? Small businesses, those who might not even recover from the coronavirus pandemic. What is the president planning? What is the government planning for those people? Electricity, now it has been a problem. What are his plans to transform the energy sector? The cost of living, which is also a very important issue, is increasing by the day. Nothing on that as well. And for me, on a final note, Sergio, I've listened to him, like I said, every chapter and verse, and he seemed to be blaming most of his woes on the coronavirus. But for me,
now,
I
that's
think
something that I want to ask you about. This was a very lengthy speech, like most of the people are saying. He's talked about all sectors of the economy, but we have to agree with Honorable Ousainou Darboe that this SONA address is almost the same as the previous SONA addresses, and the only difference is his emphasis on the coronavirus pandemic. So my question is, do you think the coronavirus pandemic is being used as a scapegoat to mask the failures of the government?
Of course, yes. And that's what I tweeted, that they're using the coronavirus as an excuse to cover up the mess and also their incompetence and also their failures. And that is very clear. And for me, I don't think the coronavirus should be blamed. A more sinister virus should be blamed, which is corruption. Corruption is the problem of this government and also economic malfeasance. I think for me, corruption has done more damage than the coronavirus to the Gambian economy and to the Gambian people. So I think corruption should have been blamed. And unfortunately, and very bizarrely as well, I haven't seen the president lay out a strategy and how he plans to fight corruption, because it has been a key issue. So therefore, blaming the coronavirus for the failures of this government, telling us that the country was on a path towards political and economic transformation, I think that wasn't right. The country was not. By all indications, obviously, the NDP has failed. It was a 3-year plan to transform the Gambia next year, 2021, and we haven't seen anything, obviously. So telling us that the reason why, what he is telling us, the reason why NDP is failing, the reason why we cannot really have economic transformation and political transformation because of COVID-19, for me that is wrong. For me, I think it's the most sinister virus called corruption.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And we will go into details about just some of the specific things that he's mentioned in the SONA address. I think we are now joined by Banka too. Banka, are you there? Can you hear us? Welcome.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. Hi, Doc.
Hello, Banka. How are you?
Doing good.
Banka, I'm sure you've also listened to today's SONA address delivered by the President of the Republic of the Gambia before the lawmakers. What is your reaction to this report?
Well, I mean, I think I totally agree with the previous speakers, i.e. Dr. Cisse and Honorable Dabo's interview earlier on. I think this is no different than what we have seen before. And unfortunately, the areas that I would have wanted to see addressed were not fully addressed. Up to this point today, the full impact, if we are going to talk about COVID-19, that is, and its impact, the full impact of COVID-19 on key areas. So, I mean, I was at least looking forward to hearing some very significant actions or moves in those areas to address them, like, for instance, the education sector. What we are seeing there is a disaster unfolding. You know, pretty much education has come to a standstill. And with exams coming up and all these issues that we have, we don't know how that is fully being addressed by the government. So we don't know really what's going on with that. And I can talk about a whole lot of other areas like that. So it's pretty much like a speech like one before, where a government just comes out and lays out government programs and, you know, and things like that. When we have a national emergency or catastrophe unfolding, that really needs more urgent attention than anything else.
Like Doctor said, it seemed like this address is made up of reports from every ministry that were just put together and then given to the president to read. He mentioned some of the achievements of his government, and he gave figures that this is what we've achieved in areas like youth employment. But the reaction from the Gambian people was that, where are you getting these figures from? This does not represent the things that are on the ground. Do you think that these are things that are just given to him to read to the Gambian people, but in theory, do you think he really understands?
Well, it's not a matter of him understanding it or not understanding it. I mean, this is, again, is a spin. At the end of the day, when you don't, if you create only 1,000 jobs, you come out and say youth employment is significantly down. That's a spin, because at the end of the day, when you look at this, when you hear what they are saying, you want to be able to at least feel that happening on the ground. But if you come to me and you tell me, oh, the economy is doing great, and yet I see 90% of the population under stress, economic stress, and with no relief in sight, and really suffering under the weight of this burden that is really so catastrophic in nature. But yet you are telling me, oh, the economy is doing awesome. I mean, I listen, I hear stuff like that, and I just cringe and sometimes smile, because it doesn't make any sense. You are right. I mean, I think that the numbers don't match with what we are seeing on the ground and how the people feel and their experience, for that matter. So they need to really be realistic about these things. It's not a matter of spinning. Tell us the truth. If the economy is not doing so well, tell us, well, the economy is not doing well, and here is why. If we've only created 1,000 jobs, tell us we have only created 1,000 jobs, and here is why. Gambians are they're the easiest people to deal with. All you gotta do is be upfront with them, no matter how difficult the situation is, or no matter how messed up it is. They can hunker down. These people are tough. They've lived under 22 years of dictatorship, and they've weathered that storm. So that means they are tough, they are fighters, they can withstand any suffering, they can do anything that you ask them to do, they can be able to move mountains, but you have to be upfront with them, because otherwise you're going to raise false expectations, and because of that, they might let their guards down or might not really get in their fighting mode, which in effect is going to affect the overall, I would say, improvement in terms of the economy and all the other sectors that you need their participation for. So I think it's really a bad idea to come there and paint a rosy picture when the picture is a whole different story. So I'm not crazy about it. Yes.
And back to you, Dr. Banka, I'll just pick up from where you left off, talking about the economy. We know that if there's anything that needs special attention right now, is in fact the economy of the Gambia. Now, oftentimes we hear institutions like the IMF giving us a technical economic growth, like the economy of the Gambia has grown to 6%, but most of the time, again, these are not things that, you know, that the local people feel. But even today, the president himself couldn't deny deny the fact that the economy is doing bad. He said that GDP has gone down or will go down from 6% to 2%. Has gone down or will go down from 6% to in fact 2%. What do you make of that?
I mean, obviously, like you said, these macroeconomic indications don't really reflect what's happening on the ground. I mean, Gambia can be posting 10% of economic growth, GDP growth every year, but does it really reflect the life and livelihoods of the people? Does it translate to creating more jobs for young Gambians? Does it translate to reducing the cost of living for Gambian people, the cost of cash power, the cost of rice, the cost of cooking oil, and so on and so forth? Does it really reflect? Does it really improve the living conditions of Gambians? No. These indicators obviously are very important because help us kind of for long-term planning and so on and so forth. But they don't reflect. And for me, Africa has been posting high, sometimes double-digit growth rates in the past 5-10 years in some parts of sub-Saharan Africa. But it doesn't reflect in the life of the people. I think what the president could have told today, yes, tell us that look, growth will go down because there's a looming global recession because of the coronavirus. Now, what is the government strategy to ensure that Gambia is insulated from this recession? What do you intend to do? What are the stimulus packages? How do you want to really revive and make sure that you really keep the Gambian economy going? What are your economic plans? What are your economic strategies? That is what we expect from speeches like that, and not just telling us that yes, blaming everything on a global crisis and so on and so forth. We've seen the 2008 economic crisis, even though it is not of the same magnitude as what we'll be facing now. But I think Gambia was a bit insulated at that time, and I think for us, good economic planning, good economic strategies will help us go through this, but nothing of that sort of that from the president.
Another thing that he's obviously talked about is the issue of security. I know this is a topic that you've been very vocal about in the past week following his statement that he wants to prolong the stay of ECOMIG into the country. In his speech, I can't quote him verbatim, but I've heard him say that the local security forces, of course, are here to safeguard our sovereignty and things like that. But this is for someone who's still insisting that economic forces continue to stay in the country. Why is it important for the president to find an exit strategy, like you call it, for these foreign forces?
It's important because economic cannot be here forever. Economic came for a purpose. It was a stabilization force. It was supposed to help in the transition. But for now, there is no insight. And history teaches us that foreign forces in a particular country, longer than needed, can lead to more complications. So for me, I think now, what I want to know exactly is the president is making unilateral decisions when it comes to this economic issue. It's not taking to the National Assembly. We want to know what lawmakers are also thinking about it. Public opinion has been really neglected when it comes to the economic issues, and these are very dangerous.
Seems like the doctor has left again. Doctor, are you there?
Am I back again?
Yes, you're back again.
So if you neglect public opinion and take unilateral decisions, and it begs the question, who's advising the president? What assessment is it based on? His decision to extend economic demand? Based on what assessment? Based on what intel? What do they know that we don't know? What is the need for that? And for how long as well? And for me, I think now we should be talking about economic exit strategy. They've been in the country for almost 4 years, and they're going to be here for 5 years. Therefore, you don't just eject them one morning and let them leave. There must be kind of a plan of succession. They have to transfer. They have to work with our security forces to ensure that there's a smooth handing over of the security. So that starts now. That could take up to 12 to 18 months in terms of planning that exit. So, but we haven't seen any exit strategy. There is no strategy to plan for economic exit. What we are hearing is every 6 months extend, but nothing is. There is no transparency. Why are we extending? What do you know that we don't know? Based on what assessment? And that is what is mind-boggling.
Just two more important things before I let you both go. Benga, I want to take you to the issue of foreign affairs. He said that his government has downsized on some of the foreign services, which will be, of course, embassies and representative offices outside the country that were thought to be perhaps inefficient or stuff. But as far as the coronavirus pandemic is concerned, we've had some situations where the government were not very open in handling the situation. For instance, we have seen the stranded girls from Lebanon who were actually brought back to the country through an NGO that was headed by Lovett Jallow. And still through this pandemic, we have still seen Gambians who are stranded in other countries. I remember I did an interview here with two guys from Dubai who said they were stranded in Dubai, over 20 of them, and they were seeking repatriation from the government of the Gambia, but it seemed like their request was torn, deaf ears were given to their request. What do you think about the foreign ministry in terms of their work and what they do to serve Gambians abroad?
Well, number one, I do believe that the foreign embassies need to be reduced. Most of them are just there. We are not getting any bang for our buck, if you will. Now, as far as the stranded Gambians all around the world, what is actually happening, because the Lovett Jallow versus Ministry of Foreign Affairs situation, that situation, whole case did not make any sense, Sergio. I kept, and I said this before, I kept reading and from both sides, trying to get an idea of what the whole hoopla was all about, and I couldn't make a single sense of it. Why? Because Lovett stepped forward and wanted to help her organization to help these stranded ladies in Lebanon. All I was expecting from the foreign ministry really is to say, hey, awesome, let's work with you, tell us how we can facilitate this, how we can point. The young lady and her organization are just trying to do the right thing, a noble cause for that matter. There was no reason to really turn that into the kind of brouhaha that it became. So, and I think that that's more of it's symptomatic of the way and nature that this government is operating on so many levels. That is, you have many people who have the goodwill and want to step in and help from the diaspora here, especially, to work with the government and mitigate a lot of these issues. But for some reason, they act as the diaspora is a whole different, what do you call it, the new opposition that has to be tackled and fought against, and to make sure that they cannot even help in where they need to help. So I think that for all those guys that are stranded all over the world, like you said, they are pretty much on their own, unfortunately. So it will take another Lovett Jallow and our organization, or his or our organization, to step up and then try to help these people, because with the attitude that these people have taken with these young ladies in Lebanon and many other cases before, this is not new. We have had these instances before where it's in Kuwait and other places where government literally acted like they don't care about these people and their plight. So at the end of the day, if you are out there stranded, I'm letting you know that I'm sorry to break the news to be bad news to you, but seek help elsewhere. Reach out to the Lovett Jallows of this world and organizations and see how they can help, because the government, instead of helping with this situation, even working with institutions to make this happen if they cannot, are not even willing to do that. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm still trying to make sense of it. Maybe if I hear more from them, I'll get an idea of why the animosity towards such people. But it is what it is. I think that we need to reduce these embassies, because they are not, just like we have seen with Lebanon's case, these people are just not doing their job. They are not effective. They are just occupying space. And really, the government is just spending money for no reason, because these embassies are not serving any purpose. If I could get it my way, I would close 80% of these embassies all around the world, Gambian embassies, and then consolidate them into others. Let's have only one for Western Europe, for instance, and one for Eastern Europe. That's it. And then, I'm obviously one in the United States and two for the Middle East, and two. In other words, literally have as few of them as possible. Not these many embassies all over the world and you keep asking yourself, you are spending all this money and we are not seeing
it takes
any
a lot of
benefits
money to
out of
finance
it.
an embassy and its staff who are in a
Absolutely,
foreign country.
a lot of foreign currency too. Yes, a lot of foreign currency.
And Doctor, before I let you go, if you listen to the president's address today, he has talked about some of the plans that they are planning to implement. The Gambia Police Force will be getting a lab, and lucky to tap funds from this, we are lucky to tap funds from there. Is that something that you're worried about?
I got interrupted at some point.
Yes.
Yes. I was saying that if you listen closely to the president's speech, he has mentioned quite some projects that he said his government is planning to implement. Now, most of the time you hear about these projects, he says we've been able to tap funds from this, we've been able to tap funds from there. Is there something that actually bothers you?
Of course, because it is not sustainable. I mean, a country cannot outsource the whole development agenda to the outside world, to donors, depending on that. I think it's time for us to be thinking of a more sustainable economic strategy by harnessing our own resources. We are coming up with innovative ways of using funds to support and sponsor our development projects. It's not bad to seek support, obviously, donor partners, obviously, but for how long would that take place? It doesn't last long. I mean, it's time for us to really reorganize and start thinking, start looking towards how can we generate funds in that? How can we use our resources? How can we create those institutions and those systems and those processes to ensure that we generate wealth locally and that whatever comes from outside, we just complement our own local efforts. But I mean, if you listen to this, everything, we thank the UNDP, we thank this, we thank that, we thank this, we thank that. I mean, everything is coming from outside. I mean, that is quite dangerous. I think in 57 years of independence, I think what should be thinking of now is how can we really harness our local resources. And what pains me is that our resources have been really sold and opened to outsiders, to outside forces who come and take all our resources and leave. Yet we cannot really use our resources to benefit our people. We have to be begging from the outside world, and this is symptomatic of the whole system. Everything that we do, we have to depend on outside support, and I think that is very dangerous. A country cannot live like that. I haven't seen any country in the world that has developed by depending totally on donor partners and on aids and grants. I've seen countries that have really used it wisely to develop. Vietnam is one such country. Vietnam is not supposed to develop by all indication, but today it's been given as an example of one of the most successful countries after all that the country has gone through, after wars and so on and so forth. And they benefit from aid money because they use it wisely. But for us, I think it's time for us to think that we have resources in the Gambia, ample resources, from our human resource to you name it. How can we really start harnessing those resources, generate local wealth, to come up with a development agenda that is sustainable, that is inclusive, that also is in tune with our local values, and any help.
Time to exhaust everything that the president has talked about today in his SONA address. But finally, I want to touch on something that is really important to the Gambian people right now, and I think it should matter to all our politicians, which is the issue of our natural resources, being it land or water resources. Now, he said in his speech that they're doing as much as they can to protect the water resources of the country. Now, this is a time, if you've been following the stories in the Gambia, fish is scarce. And when you ask the locals, most of the time, yes, some people say it's because of the rains, but most of the time they accuse the Chinese fish meal factories along the coast of causing harm to our water resources. What do you have to say about the presence of these factories along the coast, even after locals have made claims so many times that they do not want them on their lands because they are simply destroying their livelihoods?
I think one thing that you should know, Sergio, and the Gambian people should know, is we are heading for a looming environmental disaster in the country. They are selling and imposing all our natural resources without any consideration for future generations. The welfare of future generations is at stake. They are selling all the land, even all the reserve land. For me, those Chinese factories should be closed. They have no business operating under those conditions in the Gambia by exploiting our people, exploiting our mineral resources, and also our sand resources. I think the whole thing is just a mess. They've really mortgaged the country to foreign forces, to the highest bidder, if I may use that term. And I think that is very dangerous. So for me, I'm really worried about the future of the environment has taken really low priority at the moment as we speak. If you go to most of these quarries where they mine sand, you'll be amazed at how much we are destroying our environment. Our marine resources have been exploited. We have over 300 fishing trolleys encroaching our territorial waters on a daily basis. We cannot even have fish in our markets for our people to eat. And our land, even the so-called reserve land, reserve of future generations, have been really selling without any recourse for proper future planning for schools, planning for roads, planning for hospitals, planning for green spaces. All this is not really on the agenda. And what my fear is that the next generation will come and they'll find nothing absolutely that we left behind for them, and that would be a big disaster.
Thank you very much, Dr. Banka. What do you have to say to the Gambian people and, of course, the president of the Gambia?
Now, look, for the Gambian people, I guess at this point right now, they've all come to realize that we are in a very, very, very consequential period of our history, whether in terms of politics or economy or health. I can go through a whole litany of them. So what that means is that everybody has to have their eyes and ears scenarios where people are going to lose their lives, as we see. So many people are dying in the country. It's not even funny. When it comes to the women who are dying in labor, I mean, I can go. We can talk about these things all day, as far as what is unfolding right before our own eyes. And these are government policy ramifications. So what people ought to know is they need to understand that this is not a time period where people can pretend that the politics, quote unquote, is not their problem or their issue. Everybody's got to be involved. They have to scrutinize every action of the government, and they have to speak out and have their voices heard. On the other hand, as far as the government is concerned, what I have to tell the government is, look, there is no need to spin these things. All you have to do is be realistic and tell the people the truth, because that's the best way to manage their expectations. Because if you create this false hope or paint this very rosy picture, many people are going to rely on that and they're going to believe it. Well, it is the wrong thing to believe in or to rely on, because at the end of the day, the reality that they are facing is a whole different story. So what I'm urging Barrow to do is to make sure that when he comes out to address the Gambian people in times like this, we have a very, very, very critical issue that is on hand, which is COVID-19. Are we performing enough tests for the people? Do we have enough oxygen tanks and materials available? Do we are the hospitals staffed enough to be able to deal with the mess that we have? Do we have the frontline workers? Are they being taken care of? We have a lot of very, 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 very urgent matters that are needed to be dealt with right now at this moment. And those things cannot be dealt with if you are going to spin this and give a rosy picture and make it sound like what it is not. On the other hand, the diaspora can play a very significant role in this. You see, Sergio and Dr., when I watch them really going out there and distributing rice to households and all these things, and they are touting that as such a big deal, I'm sitting here really shaking my head. You see, that aid package that they are delivering to the households is the aid package that diaspora delivers literally every month, at the end of every month, that the diaspora delivers to families back home. So that means there is somebody who can fill that void for you and help you significantly address that problem. All this government has to do is reach out to the diaspora and say, look, we want to be able to, for our people to be able to survive in this very critical period. We need to have an aid package for them. But here is where we are as far as our finances are concerned and our budgetary issues, challenges are concerned.
But Banka, sometimes the diaspora is actually the diaspora is actually seen as the enemy most of the time. I've seen a comment on Facebook a couple of days ago, and someone said most of the problems in the Gambia are actually caused by the diasporans. And he said these diasporans women. So sometimes the diaspora is actually viewed as an enemy to the nation.
Pushing that kind of narrative or behaving in such a way. And I mean, that's why I was not surprised by the way they treated Robert Jallow. So, because at the end of the day, the diaspora is seen and treated to be that way, and the people have come to believe it. Otherwise, in cases like this, where the diaspora is literally providing relief packages to families every month, you can all you have to do is liaise and work with those with the diaspora and say, guys, we need this help to be amplified in so many ways. That relief package that is being delivered to those homes, that is this bags of rice and oil and all these things, the diaspora could have easily filled that void for the government. Those resources that have been directed in that direction, which is according to them $500 million, could have been used to get more equipment for the frontline workers, or even compensate them or encourage them, or in other areas that are also needed. But when you want to do this all by yourself and you want to rely on this idea, oh, well, we just go to countries and beg them for help. We cannot beg ourselves out of this situation. It's not going to happen. At some point, Gambians themselves have to take the initiative. Us and our government have to come together, hunker down, and really take our matters and our future into our own hands. If others want to help, well, we'll be glad to have the help, but we are not going to sit there and rely on it and plan based on that aid that is going to come from elsewhere. Because if you do that, what if that aid doesn't come? Countries around the world have their own challenges right now, including even most powerful countries, United States. Right now, the U.S. deficit alone is so huge, it's not even funny. So that means the aid package that they've been able to deliver to third world countries, you will see most of that dwindle. United Kingdom, I can go through all these countries that have been our traditional helpers. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we increase our tax base, for instance, by creating more jobs so that you can have more people working and paying taxes into government coffers, and also work with the diaspora, which is a huge constituency with so much potential, a lot of resources at their disposal, and to be able to prop up our economy, create jobs, create more businesses, have more entrepreneurs, make sure that we have a vibrant economic system that is going to help propel this country into the 21st century. If we don't do that, this idea that we are just going to go, oh, let's go to the EU, let's go to this country, let's go to that country, because that's all I hear. Well, we got $31 million recently from the US, and they're helping with this. We also got this from that World Bank, also da-da-da. We are always talking in terms of aid from these countries. We cannot rely on such, this is not, our policy cannot be based on that. And for me, it strikes at the core of our dignity. It strikes at the core of our sovereignty as a nation, because these things do come with their strings attached to them. They do come with all kinds of implications for our country that we really, I think that we are selling our country out and we don't even know it. This is why the fisheries has a problem. We talked about that, the EU deal and the Chinese coming in and taking over, our infrastructural projects, our, telecommunications, our electricity supply. Everything has literally been mortgaged out, because we are literally going to those institutions and countries and begging them, and they are not giving us those funds for free. They are expecting something in return. This is the problem.
They are not
so
for free, and even though it's never made very clear to the people, they are not for free. There is always a string attached.
Thank you. Absolutely. And so Barrow needs to really hunker, let him reach out. Let's all sit down as a country, as a nation, and work together and salvage our country. No enemies here. Let's not treat each other as us against them or that person against that person. And this is the kind of culture we have perpetrated. This is the kind of culture we have inculcated. And this is the culture that has become so pervasive that it has really, we are at a stalemate. Muhammad will not go to the mountain, and the mountain is not going to Muhammad. And that stalemate cannot continue. We have to find a way to come together and work on this. Otherwise, we are all doomed. We are going to fail. That's why in that country, you are there, Sergio. You know nothing is working. Everybody's frustrated. Everybody's suffering. I mean, even the ones that are supposed to be doing well are not doing well at all. They are frustrated, no electricity, no water supply, none of that. Healthcare is a disaster. And we will continue to be like that until and unless we really start to give more respect to each other, more due consideration to each other, and work together as a team. Other than that, we are definitely all sinking. Really.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Banker. Now, just finally, before we close, Doctor, this was supposed to be an address that will uplift the Gambian people. Now, some believe that it has actually missed the mark. I know you've actually reiterated the need for opposition parties to not just be opposition parties, always criticizing the policies and the plans that government has in place, but they also need to be alternative parties. What do you have to say to the Gambian people?
Well, like you said, the speech was supposed to inspire hope in a time of crisis, in a time where there are so many uncertainties and so much hopelessness. And I think it did not do that. But I think now more than ever, and I agree with Banker, we had an impasse in this country 2016, 2017, obviously. That impasse was caused by a friction between the Gambian people and the Gambian former president. But the impact is still on among ourselves now. I think what we need to do now, like Banker said, is to work together as Gambians, because we have so many things at stake, Sadio. The future of this country is at stake. The very existence of this country is at stake. And I agree with Banker that the government needs to come up with a proper comprehensive strategy in how to strategically engage the diaspora. The diaspora has two things that the Gambian needs urgently. That is capital and expertise. How do you really harness this? And you have to also understand that the whole issue, the whole notion that the diaspora is seen as opposition is not founded. Why is that the case? But the diaspora is, for me, it is the middle class.
Seems we've lost Doctor again. Let's see if he comes back. Yes.
So it is the middle class living outside. When there is an increase in electricity, the diaspora feels it. Pump price, the diaspora feels it. When there's an increase in the bag of fire, diaspora, because they pay for most of these basic things back home. So obviously they are the ones who hold government accountable. They are the ones who have to speak and make sure that government is in line. So for me, I think we need to move away from that. The political polarization currently affecting the country, helping no one any good. I think this is a time for us to come together as Gambian. Unity now should be the key word. For me, the president called for a national conference. You bring all political parties together, no matter the political affiliation. Diaspora, anybody who wants to take that country, civil society, media, let us sit as one country and define a path for this country, define a future for this country. We are not doing it for ourselves. We are doing it for people. We have to save this country from the kind of path it is taking now. So for me, unity is key, and I think anybody who speaks now should be speaking along those lines. The kind of political polarization, the toxic political banter, the mudslinging, the insults, it's not helping anybody. It's not going to do anybody any good. And I think we owe it to the executive to ensure that we come together now, unite, come up with one force, and make sure that we come up with the policies and the strategies to work together and harness our resources to build this country, not only for today, but also for tomorrow.
That's right. Unity is key. Thank you very much, there, Dr. Ismaila Ceesay and Banker Mane. I really appreciate you guys for coming through to the Fatu Network News Review today. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Banker. Well, that's it for News Review. Do join us on Monday if you can. Thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.
Where the heart is.